Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Mottola, CEO of the Human Cloud. Super excited to talk with you all today. Wonder where everyone is sitting. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, but I've kind of lived all over because of this industry. Today we're going to talk about probably one of the most important / most asked for talks that we've had, and that is Freelance 2.0, how our once called gig economy is now transitioning into a strategic sourcing channel. And so a little background on myself. I'm the CEO of the Human Cloud. I've been fortunate to be in this industry my whole life. That's why I look so tired, because there is so much opportunity in this space. I've been fortunate to live in Silicon Valley, to live in Seattle, to live in Singapore, Miami, Georgia now. And it's because this industry has just boomed over the last 5 years. So what I want you to walk away with in this presentation is I actually want to throw up a challenge. And I want you to think, what if we stopped saying it's a revolution, which we're guilty of that, and instead said it was an evolution? And my hypothesis is that if we can do this, if we can solve this, then that's what's going to drive us going from a freelance economy to a strategic sourcing channel. So here's sort of the nuts of why I believe that. So what this is, it's very boring. This is typical market sizing. And if you look at sort of what the full total addressable market looks like, there's probably over $6 trillion that we can gradually go after. So these are markets that are adjacent. These are markets that we don't have to have a revolution for. We simply have to have incremental, gradual shifts to capture. And so if we break this down, I want you to immediately look at the blue tab. And you'll see this is the talent platform revenue. So at $44.49 billion. This is only for talent platforms, right? So these are the freelance marketplaces. If we go down and we go above, we start to see SOW consultants, we see temp workers, we see independent contractors. And a stat that commonly gets thrown around is the $5.4 trillion. I would argue that is an immediate market that every single one of us should be gradually going towards right now. I went above a step further, though. If you look at the top, if you look at the management consulting and advertising agency side, I'd argue that we also should be going after that as well. And so that looks like directly bidding against the McKinseys, the Bains, the agencies, directly bidding against them. And that unlocks over $600 billion as well. So another quick thing I want you to look at, if you look at the top, you see CAGR, compound annual growth rate. I want you to see that our industry, it's at a 16.5% up until 2030%. The reason I want you to look at that number is because you'll see it's much higher than temp and management consulting and advisory, but it's lower than AI. So I put this up at first kind of as a joke, but it really does give us a good insight that this is not a crazy revolution, i.e. 30% CAGR. This is a very consistent, stable, persistent 16% CAGR. So with that, I want to kind of bring you into my world and show you what we're seeing. So at Human Cloud, we're fortunate to work with over 30 marketplaces. We've worked with over 50 enterprises, and we're fully global. So we've worked on every single continent. And so I want to kind of bring you into what we see from working with the top people in this industry. So there's 4 shifts. And this is sort of what we call Freelance 2.0, right? Going from 1.0 to 2.0. And these 4 shifts, we can break them down by talent demographics, marketplaces, clients, and sourcing, how sourcing is changing. So at first, let's going to go line by line. So we're going from small and gig. That is where we were, right? That is the typical gig economy. That is the transactional. That is the task-based. That is the less than $500 average ticket size. We're going from that to large and fractional. Fractional is one of the fastest growing segments. That looks like the person that is 5 to 15 years at a notable brand, the Googles, the Microsofts, the HubSpots, the J&Js, you name it, and saying, instead of being a director, I want to be a fractional, whatever it is they're best at. So a fractional CMO, a fractional CTO, a fractional developer, you name it. So that's the talent demographics. On the marketplace side, we're seeing it going from horizontal to niche. Now, this doesn't mean we're getting rid of horizontal. It means that we're going upstream in ticket size. So instead of having $500 gigs, This looks like $5,000 to $15,000 to $500,000 deals. On the client side, we're going from SMB to enterprise. Enterprise typically means more than 1,000 freelancers or more than 50,000 employees. We're talking the big companies. And then from a sourcing perspective, we're going from, hey, find an individual freelancer to either find me a very good freelancer or find me freelancers at scale. So quick example, IT outsourcing client, they need to match SAP developers, ServiceNow developers, typical IT outsourcing type of deployments. They don't want just one freelancer. They need 30 to 100 freelancers at a time. So that's the shift that we're seeing in the industry. Now, how do you make sure you're on the right side of this? So if you're the enterprise leader, how do you make sure that your sourcing strategy, that your company is ready for this? If you are the marketplace leader, how do you make sure that your marketplace is ready for this? We're going to go over 5 quick things. We're going to go over some stats. We're going to align on the terms and the definitions. We're going to navigate the ecosystem. It's much more than just saying the freelance economy. We're going to embrace job to be done. So what is the problem? What's the solution? And then I'm going to give you a quick way to get hiring managers started. So here's some quick stats that we love. Now, there are plenty, and we have a link to sort of our stat database, but some of my favorite ones. As we just showed you, there's been $5.4 trillion spent on freelancers globally in 2022, but deeper than that, this one comes from MIT Sloan and Deloitte. 86% of leaders say external contributors are critical to their org's overall performance. So that's on the company side. On the individual side, there's 435 million global freelancers, according to the World Bank. What's impressive, though, there's 60% more freelancers since 2020. And probably my favorite side of all time is right now, and this actually, there's some data coming out. Steve King, if you're listening, I know your ears are going to pop. But so there's been a 27% year-over-year growth in 100K plus freelancers. I love that stat. I'll tell you why later. And then last, there's 9 in 10 freelancers believe their best days are ahead. Over 60% of freelancers, if given a full-time opportunity, would not take it. So it's, there's no going back. Companies love this. Individuals love this. And if you look to the right, finally, we got some company logos. So now let's hit the spike on terms. I would argue that terminology is probably the leading thing that gets in the way. And it just confuses people. It gives them the wrong perception of this industry. And so I would throw a massive red flag. Now, I've been in this for 10 plus years. So we've kind of seen a lot of different terms used by a lot of different people. So we have open talent, we have gig economy, we have elastic workforce, we had the liquid workforce. There are so many terms. We have flex work. I bet you right now as we speak, there's a new term getting thrown above. I'll give you a quick little story, fun fact. Human cloud, which we're contributing to make it even worse probably. But so human cloud, the way that was named was in writing the book, the original title was actually ready for it. And there was 2 sections, human cloud and machine cloud, because it was really all about the combination of tech and the freelance economy. But so, sitting in a coffee shop with a friend, and we were going back and forth with the publisher, what should the name be? We were looking at data on, which type of titles jumped, and the data was basically didn't say anything. And the person I'm sitting with just goes, why not just call it the human cloud? I mean, that sounds exactly like what you're talking about. And asking him, well, what do you mean? He said, well, obviously putting humans first, enabled by technology, just name it the human cloud. So who cares about the terminology? But it does get really, really, really confusing, which is why, quick little joke, if we were in person, we could maybe fake laugh at me right now. But so famous Winston Churchill saying, we kind of adjusted it. And we think that if he was around today, he would say it's been said that the freelance economy is the worst term, except all that's been tried. So we're going to pose that freelance is good enough, to be honest. There's a couple quick things that we would say when we say freelance. We are talking about a digital supply chain of work. We're talking about a digital supply chain that doesn't replace. This is massive. Make sure you're not saying this, that it's going to replace. It doesn't replace HR, doesn't replace procurement. It doesn't replace full-time employment. It augments it. And then when looking at sort of how, if you look into the right, the visual, we're not saying this is brand new. We're also not saying that this is like the existing channels. And so if you look at internal and external, meaning your agencies, your full-time, your internal employees, it's all been based around full-time employment. freelance is fundamentally different in some ways, fundamentally not in others, but I think it can be its own category. And I think freelance is enough. And just some quick stats on the bottom, make sure you literally have these memorized. There's over 435 million global freelancers. Usually takes 2 to 5 days to find a good freelancer. There's 30 to 60% cost savings. I've seen that number go to 90 at times. And there's 95% CSAT. Now, every marketplace sort of records their data differently, but we can assume, actually it shouldn't be 95, it should be 4.7, but whatever. We can assume 95% plus of CSAT from what we've seen. Now, navigating this ecosystem. So my own experience with this is when I started, I was in Silicon Valley and I was so excited for the tech side of this. So I was early at Gigster, and Andreessen said, we're going to give money to TopDal and Gigster. Gigster, we said, we're going to do custom software dev with teams and project-based. TopDal said, we're going to staff aug. I think TopDal might have been a little more right based off of where we both stand today. That's okay. The learnings for me was this was so much more than tech. Fast forward, I'm at Microsoft leading the freelance toolkit. Start to keep hearing terms like procurement, VMS, MSP, compliance, classification, security, privacy, all these things. Long story short, there's a couple different industries that look like us, sound like us, and I don't know if they are us. I think it was, who was it? It was Deng Xiaoping who said, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. We have a similar situation here where we don't know if it's staffing. We don't know if it's a VM. There's so many different terms. Don't get confused. But the key ones, and if you go onto that link right there, we do have a database of over 150 of these companies segmented out. But so I think this is the best way to help you understand how to chop this up. There's horizontal marketplaces. So those were the ones that were first. These are the large million-plus networks. One of these networks literally has more freelancers than some countries do people. But so these are the large ones. Next is the vertical marketplaces. These are the fastest growing segment, and also put some numbers in. So horizontal, there's between 10 and 50 that we've seen. Vertical, there's over 500 globally, and these usually cover, they're the best in a region or the best in a skill. And so Catalent, the best in consulting. Caprati, the best in the Middle East. Ripple, the best in marketing. So these are very, very niche, and they're kind of quasi agencies in terms of the experience they can give because they have a direct relationship with the talent, or they're closer to the talent. Next is enablers. Now, I mean, this could honestly be 5 industries in itself. These are your freelance management systems. These are your VMSs. These are your MSPs. These are your EORs. These are your classifications. I put them all into one because they're mostly doing the enabling. And then last, this is one of the newest, is we call them the business to freelancers. So there's probably under 75 of these globally. But these are the Wethoses, the Bonsais, the Ruby Moneys, the Formations. They're going directly after the freelancer. And anyone doing that, I applaud you. We tried it at Venturel. It is painful. So now let's sort of get into why, right? The biggest thing I want you to take away is that this industry, it's not a fad. It's not that sexy, but it is a painkiller. So in a product lens, tech lens, we always hear it's a painkiller vitamin. Vitamin, you don't need it. So if you're screaming in pain, you're not going to get me that vitamin. Painkiller, you actually need it. A good example that I like to use is try to make an international payment. And you're going to learn real quick that TransferWise is a painkiller. Whereas when you have something that you need to do, a to-do list application, kind of a vitamin, you might not need it. So that's how I think about the difference. But so our industry, if we're being honest, it's been really, 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 really tough to get engagement. Everyone says yes, but most people don't take the next step and take action. I think that's because we've struggled to really have a painkiller, but kudos to Tim Sanders over at Upwork. And he was able to uncover the actual cost of delayed projects. And so if projects are delayed by 6 months, which I think the number is like 46% of projects fall under this category, then anticipated revenues down by 50%, profit after taxes down 33%, and share price going down 12%. So if you're looking at this and you're an enterprise leader, you should be showing this to your executive team, your manager, whoever, literally right now. This is not okay. Now, that's like the boom, right? I'm going to kind of show you some of the now vitamin aspect of this, because there's three main reasons that we see CEOs and executive teams really leaning into the freelance economy. And that's the global talent shortage. This has been around since I was doing this in 2014. There's productivity glut and there's an inability to compete. And so I'm going to go in reverse order. Inability to compete, McKinsey says that between like 50 and 75% of Fortune 500s won't exist. Number's kind of crazy, but the reality is that it's true. It's never been harder to compete. If we look at the last piece of data and we look at productivity, it starts to uncover to me why. So if we look at productivity, the average time that an employee is productive is 31% of the time. It's probably even higher than that. How in the world can you be competitive if your employees are literally not working 30 to 50% of the time or not caring about you? And then lastly, there's a global talent shortage. That one, come on, everyone kind of knows what that is. So in terms of pairing it up, right? And I want to make sure I give you an example that I had a couple of weeks ago. So at first, this slide was talking about how there's a global talent shortage and all these things. And a client literally just stops straight up and goes, "What are you talking about? There's not a global talent shortage." I said, "Okay, tell me more." And he said, "There's a global structural shortage in that the talent is there, but the process to get there is not." And so if you're sitting in a large enterprise, you know that if you need someone in the building right now, either you're opening up budget to go through the approved vendor process or you're opening up a rec. Both are going to take you 3+ months. They're going to be really painful. So this, when we say global talent shortage, what we're recognizing is that the current channels have a structural problem. So honestly, kind of want to skip through this. Alina, I'm sure, will give you the full deck. We'll find a way to make sure you have the full deck. But what I really want you to know is that first slide is that your revenues are going down 50% if you don't deliver on time. Now, I just want to give you some quick bites. When you think about the business case, it usually gets broken down into access, speed, and incentives. So access meaning how many people can we have access to? A great quote comes from one of the leaders over at Airbus who said, there's 130,000 full-time with us. There's 70 million plus doing exactly what we need. Why aren't we accessing that? Second one comes from a leader over in an IT outsourcing firm. That's probably Fortune 500. And he calls this his SWAT team. So when he talks about speed, he says, "I have my SWAT team I can get together in days." And last is I want to talk about a marketing freelancer who, to me, this quote just nails why freelancing is so important to the full ecosystem. Is he says, when you're a freelancer, you turn into a different person when you're directly incentivized. So how many people can say that about having a full-time role? This, I'm going to skip through it, enjoy it after. This is really geeky. This is looking at McKinsey's innovation horizon. It's super, super geeky. You'll have it later. What I want you to walk away with is, and I always try to make sure in these you have something tangible and you have something that you can give to somebody else. So the hardest thing that I've seen in this space is getting someone to actually hire and getting someone to actually take that first step. It's kind of like, to be honest, I should have gone to the gym this morning. I haven't been in 2 weeks. I really don't want to go later today. What's the quickest way to get me to do something to start to get in that rhythm? Well, it's no secret that most hiring managers, when they see a freelance marketplace, the data that I've seen is less than 30%, we could say 30 to 50%, are actually going to go through and submit. They might start, but they're not going to go through and actually submit. And there's so many reasons for this. They don't know what they're hiring for usually. They don't know what the going price is. And they simply don't want to be a hiring manager. That title cracks me up. Who says I want to be a hiring manager? So what you're going to walk away with now is this is the 2 questions that we use to really spark people getting started. Now, if you're an enterprise leader, you go building to building right now and you get someone to physically write down what exactly they need. Okay. If you're a marketplace leader, you make sure you make it as simple as just putting 1 to 3 sentences of what you need throughout your process. So I'm going to answer these for you. Oh man, cheesy animation. But so go through this with your team. If you're internal, go through this with your customers. And make sure you iron out the myths, have a good laugh of what you think freelancing is. My favorite is that freelancers are sitting on a beach somewhere. and then literally just have them write down what it is they need. There's an exercise before. We'll talk about that later. So one last thing I'll let you walk away with is I guarantee you that if you run into a leader who's a decision maker with budget, that's director and above, they are sitting on a presentation, either internal or external, that they haven't designed and that they either haven't presented or are embarrassed to because they need someone to design it. And so a really, really quick kryptonite way to get people started in the freelance economy is what you see right here. Just design me an executive keynote, interview for an hour, research some data points for me, and create some net new diagrams. Take that, give it to a good freelancer, and you're going to have the best presentation ever. Hopefully this one was pretty good because, yes, I had help from freelancers. So that's it. Thank you. And hop with any questions, I think, Alina.